Great. So welcome, everyone. We are so thrilled to have you. As you can tell, this is our inaugural um, run of community conversations. So we're still working out some kinks and bugs, but we're so appreciative of all of you being here and taking time out for this amazing conversation. My name's Erin Sricharoon. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the grant writer for Return to Zero Hope. I also have a passion for storytelling. And so I'm excited to be facilitating our panel today. I want to welcome you to our inaugural community conversation event. Today, we're going to be focusing on motherhood stories on loss. We're thrilled to have you here for this intimate and important conversation. Before we begin, I would like to tell you a little bit about us if you're new to the organization. The mission of Return to Zero Hope is to offer hope and healing to those impacted by pregnancy and infant loss through genuine connection, holistic support, inclusive resources, and grief-informed education. We offer direct service and resources to bereaved parents and families, while also providing support and education material to providers and those working with families experiencing pregnancy and infant loss. We invite you to visit our website to access a host of resources, support group offerings, and education materials. As part of our commitment to engaging a global community of bereaved parents and providers, this event is provided free, in part by generous donations from our supporters. Please consider becoming a supporter of RTZ Hope and our community conversation series with a suggested donation of $15. You can do this by visiting our website. And I'd also just really like to take a moment to acknowledge the amazing donors who are part of our Lighthouse program. The Lighthouse is our special group of monthly supporters who ensure that we can continue providing support to the community, both now and for years to come. If you're interested in joining as a monthly supporter, we would be incredibly grateful and value your support in that. You can do that through our website as well, and I'll put that in the chat in just a little bit. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. To allow for uninterrupted conversation, we will be holding questions to the end. We encourage you to introduce yourself in the comments. Feel free to share where you're attending from and what drew you to our event today. We'd love to get to know you, but we do ask that you put questions in the chat only instead of asking during the event. At the end, we will try to make time to ask the questions of our panel members, but rest assured that any questions that don't get asked during the event will be asked via email to all the panel members, and I will send out all of the answers to all participants. There will also be a recording sent to anybody who registers for the event, and you can feel free to pass that around to friends and family as you wish. We also understand that this conversation may generate the need for support. If you do feel the need in real time during the event to reach out to a member of our staff, please reach out to Betsy Winter via email. Email is betsy@rtzhope.org. And again, I'll put that in the chat in just a minute. It is now my true pleasure to introduce our panel. I am so honored that they have agreed to share their stories and perspectives today. I'm even more honored that I get to work alongside of them. All of these amazing women are part of the RTC staff and board. We will be chatting about our various experiences of pregnancy and infant loss. We hope to bring this topic out into the light through the stories of each of our panelists, and that it provides a healing journey, not only for ourselves, but for others who might be listening. So without further ado, Miss Holly Ann Abel. She is on our community engagement team. She's passionate about helping others find hope and joy within their grief after she lost her daughter Magnolia, who was stillborn, and experienced a miscarriage of her poppy seed. A former first grade teacher, Holly Ann realized the importance of not only telling her own story of love and loss, but also honoring other babies gone too soon, which led to her writing a children's book and starting a nonprofit. She lives in Oskaloosa with her husband and daughter Marigold, where she is a family photographer. Jaime Skidmore is on our community engagement team as well. She's a first-generation Canadian with proud Jamaican roots. She currently lives in Edmonton, Alberta with her husband and two energetic stepdaughters. After experiencing a miscarriage in 2018 and a termination for medical reasons in January of 2023, Jaime turned to Return to Zero for support. It became a transformative space, one where she was able to grieve, heal, and eventually rediscover joy. In March 2024, after 6 long years of hoping and trying, Jaime and her husband welcomed their son, Bo, into the world. Jakki is an attorney with experience in child welfare law. She has an interest in policy work, especially as it relates to children and families, and is passionate about access to resources, especially for NICU families after experiencing traumatic birth and neonatal loss of her son, Hudson. She currently resides in Indiana with her husband, son, and 2 dogs, and serves on our board. My name is Erin. My journey to motherhood includes 2 early miscarriages. I currently am the grant writer for RTZ Hope and have a nonprofit management background. Like Holly Ann, I'm also a former teacher. I taught middle school and high school. And I live with my husband and our 2 living children and an assortment of farm animals out in Cherry Valley, California. I'm also a documentary storytelling family photographer. I specialize in birth, including stillbirth and loss. And I provide doula services as well. Okay, with all that being said, I've done the formal introductions, but I really would love for you to hear from each of our panelists their story. There's only so much that can be wrapped up in a bio, and I would really love for you all to be able to share authentically a little bit about your story to get the conversation going. So if you would just introduce a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about what brings you here today.
Thank you so much, Erin. Like she said, my name is Holly Ann, and I am a proud mama to 3 babies, 2 in heaven and 1 here on earth. In January of 2021, I gave birth to my first daughter, Magnolia. She was stillborn a couple weeks before her due date due to unknown causes. My world shattered in an instant. I had imagined every detail of her arrival, her cries, her tiny fingers, wrapped around mine the sound of her laughter, and instead I left the hospital with empty arms and a heart full of lots of questions. After a very difficult second pregnancy, I welcomed my rainbow baby, Marigold, into the world. She is now 3 and has already taught me so much. During my 3rd pregnancy, we experienced a miscarriage at 9 weeks. A pregnancy that we lovingly refer to as poppy seed. And though our time together was brief, that baby left a mark on our hearts. So at the time that I lost Magnolia, I was a 1st grade teacher. My students had journeyed with me through my pregnancy, guessing baby names, tracking her fruit size week by week, and drawing pictures, of course, for Magnolia. I walked out of my classroom 8 months pregnant, and I returned with no visible evidence of motherhood. I didn't hide Magnolia's story from my students, and they honored her in the most pure ways, from blowing bubbles to heaven, searching the sky for redbirds, and writing her name in their notebooks. I channeled my grief into something meaningful. I wrote a children's book called Some Babies to help others feel seen, and eventually founded a nonprofit called Bloom Like Magnolia to honor her legacy and to support other families walking this road. Motherhood after loss has taught me that grief and joy are not opposites, they can exist side by side. And while the ache for Magnolia and poppy seed will always be with me, so is the deep love that continues to grow. So I'm so excited to be on this panel alongside these incredible women.
Thank you so much, Holly Ann. Jaime, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. As Erin mentioned, my name is Jaime and I live in Edmonton, Alberta. Life lately has been really busy. As Erin shared, I have 2 teenage bonus daughters who are 15 and 17, and then we have our 14-month-old rainbow baby, Bo. But even in the chaos, we're loving every minute of it, and most days are joyful, but some days the grief I carry is louder. I'm also a mother to 2 babies that live in heaven. And while there's much light in my life, there are still moments when that loss feels incredibly heavy. I want to thank you for holding space with me today as I share a bit about my journey to parenthood. So, our journey with loss began in 2018 when we experienced an early missed miscarriage. And at the time, never in a million years did I think that I would be navigating pregnancy loss. We were completely heartbroken, and I felt really dismissed by healthcare providers and most people in my life. People meant well with their words, but they sometimes stung. We searched for answers as to why we lost our baby, and all that we heard was these things happen sometime, and you're healthy, and you'll get pregnant again. But for us, it wasn't that easy. During our infertility, our marriage was tested through the grief and the pain, and years passed, filled with waiting and hoping and praying, and fertility treatments with dozens of negative pregnancy tests. But then finally, in October of 2022, we were overjoyed when fertility treatments had worked and we were pregnant. But because we had dealt with the loss before, we were cautiously happy about it. We wanted to be fully happy about it, but we knew that the worst things in life can happen. At our routine 12-week scan, we saw our baby swimming on the screen, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I was so happy. We hadn't gotten this far before with our first baby, and we didn't even get to see a heartbeat. But this time we saw kicking and bouncing and movement, and my heart was so full. My husband and I were elated, and after the appointment, we walked across the parking lot to a maternity clothing store, and I bought my very first pair of maternity pants. And I couldn't wait for my belly to grow into them. We went and we celebrated over dinner, just the three of us, my husband, our baby, and me. The next day while I was at work, I got a call from our midwife, and she told me that there were some anomalies found with the ultrasound, and it needed further follow-up. And at that point, my heart sank and I felt sick. We needed to wait a full week to see the specialist, and those 7 days felt like a lifetime. I wanted them to go fast so I could know if anything was wrong, but I also wanted them to go slow because I just wanted it to be a special time with my baby. When we met with the specialists and after tests and scans, we heard the words no parents ever are prepared for. Our baby had trisomy 13, a rare chromosomal condition considered incompatible with life. We were absolutely shattered. We cried, we prayed. We asked every question that we could to get different answers. We wanted our baby to be okay. But the reality remained that our baby's brain was fused together. His abdomen was forming outside of his body. He only had a single eye. There were severe abnormalities in his heart and in his lungs. We asked what it would look if we carried him to term, and the answers were devastating. There was a pain that we couldn't let him bear. So in January 2023, we made the most difficult decision of our lives to end the pregnancy and allow our sweet baby boy James to be at peace. We had his little footprints inked for us, and he was cremated alongside a teddy bear because we didn't want him to be alone. I remember selecting the urn and thinking to myself, this is so small. Why do they even make urns this little? It may be hard for some to understand, but we parented our baby the best way that we knew how. I still wonder to myself if we did the right thing. And the truth is, there may be no right answer in a situation like this. How can anyone make the right choice in such an impossible, unfair circumstance? I miss both my babies that are in heaven every single day. I hold my 14-month-old in my arms, and I often wonder what my two other babies would be like. What would they sound like? Would they look like me, or would they look like my husband? I love you, my sweet babies. And if love could have saved you, you would be here in my arms. Thank you for hearing my story.
Amy, thank you for sharing your story. I know that this is one of the first times for you to share it so openly and publicly and with detail, and I cannot say thank you enough for how sacred that gift is. Jakki, would you like to share your story?
You should have let me go first.
Noted.
Hi, I'm Jakki. I live in Oklahoma City with my husband and our two living children. we moved here about 2 years ago, and prior to that, we were living in Indiana. In 2021, actually right before my wedding, I found out that I was pregnant, and then my father-in-law had a massive heart attack the same day. Um, and we were really excited. It was unplanned. And then shortly after that, we thought that we were having an ectopic pregnancy, and turns out we weren't, which was great news. We were so excited. And then this is Jaime's fault. In September of 2021, we went to a routine MFM appointment, and they told us like this baby has to be born today. It's a rare condition. It's where the blood in the umbilical cord flows backwards, and it's really dangerous. They A lot of times they don't catch it, which results in a stillbirth. So we were so lucky that they caught it. And so Hudson was born later that night, and I was only 28 weeks pregnant, so he was immediately taken to the NICU. During my pregnancy, we had dealt with a couple of other things. We had IUGR, so he was really, really small for his gestational age. But otherwise he was healthy. And so we thought, like, oh, great, we'll spend a lot of time in the NICU, but we're all going home. And so 6 weeks later, Hudson he had developed pneumonia and like another infection, and it was just like standard things. These things happen to babies in the NICU. It's not, that, oh, it's not a big deal. It's fine. So we had gone home, and they called us an hour later and they said, you need to come back. And that was the end, just like that. So obviously, like, is very sudden, very unexpected. Like, I truly had it had never crossed my mind when he was born that this would be the outcome. So we went home, and we took a lot of time, and we had a period of time where we really were looking for answers as well. So we, looked into some genetic things and what our options were going forward. And, we basically got the clear from our doctors. There were like some genetic concerns that Hudson had, but we were able to rule out that they were completely random, that our other children would not have them if we decided to have more children. So in October of 2022, our son Simon was born. He is 2.5 now. And then in November of 2024, we had our son Bennett. And so, we've been able to like find happiness again after. So that's kind of like what brought me here is, like, when you're in it, it is so hard to think that you are ever going to be happy again, and deciding to have a baby or try for a baby after you've experienced loss is so hard and so scary. But I always thought, like, if I have this opportunity to find this kind of happiness again, why wouldn't I do that? And so that's kind of like my purpose, is like, I just want other people to know that like you can go on and you can still have a really beautiful life, even when you've like experienced the worst possible thing that can happen to you. So that's why we're here.
Jakki, Holly Ann, Jaime, thank you all for being so honest and so vulnerable, and for the tears. I think they're so important. So often one of my passions in doing these conversations is that we are able to talk about the really hard things in really authentic ways. And I think that's something we're very much taught that is not okay. My story is that I had an early miscarriage at about 7, 8 weeks. Like, I had just found out. I had planned this whole event to tell my husband, and then instead of telling him that we were pregnant, I was having him rush me to the ER because he found out that I was both pregnant and that I was probably miscarrying all at the same time. And that's how early, it was. But I remember being really thrown by it because since I had been 15, I had been told that having a baby would probably be very difficult due to some health issues. And it just was like, they're right. This is never going to happen. And just being crushed by not just the whirlwind of like the up and down of this experience, but also just like, this is the fulfillment of everything everybody has said. Like, there's just no way we're going to have babies. And holding on to that and just feeling very crushed by that whole experience. And then just wondering, do I even get to like talk about this, right? It's so early, and like most people don't even share that they're pregnant. And like the doctor said, at least you can get pregnant, and then it will, maybe it'll happen again. And it just was a lot of like self-doubt. And then 3 months later, surprise, we did get pregnant. My daughter, who's now 8, was born about 2 days before the first anniversary of our first baby, losing our first baby. And that was a beautiful, completely unexpected gift. And then when she was about 2, we got, again, unexpectedly pregnant. And I lost that pregnancy shortly after. And then a year later, I was pregnant with our son, who's turning 5 in a couple weeks. But we found out that I had a thyroid condition, which is probably what lost us our third pregnancy, an undiagnosed thyroid condition. And so that caused uh, a lot of just needing to get medicine on board, a lot of needing to get specialist appointments right away. And so there was a lot of anxiety with my son's pregnancy, and then it was during COVID. So that was a whole different thing. But both of my miscarriages were just so early. And I just remember feeling like the weight and the crushiness of them, and also just like the stigma of a very early pregnancy. And so being able to have these conversations, being able to hear our different stories, being able to see how similar and different they all are, and yet there are common themes that I heard everybody speak of. Things, Jaime, I think you said it so beautifully, of parenting your child that you're even losing, and parenting them and remembering them. Jakki, I heard the same thing. Holly Ann, parenting their memory and how we do that. And so just to sort of start it off, I would love to hear in this healing journey, what things were helpful and what things maybe weren't so helpful. I know for me that the comment of "at least you can" felt so dismissive, and I know there's a sentiment of hope behind it, and yet it just feels so dismissive. And so that was definitely something not helpful. But getting flowers on Mother's Day that had all 4 of my babies listed, that's been so healing and so helpful. And so I just would love to hear from you all what feels, and it can be super tangible, like the flowers, or it can just be something that you needed, personally intangible. So Jakki, Holly Ann, Jaime, anybody want to jump in on that one?
I can't. So I think for me, it wasn't necessarily anything tangible, but just anyone that was willing to sit with me in my darkness. And anyone who was willing to not try to fix anything, because there was nothing to be fixed, or to come up with these platitudes of everything happens for a reason, your baby's in a better place and this is how it was meant to be, or just think about how awful this the world is, and good thing she didn't have to see that or go through that. And I think, what's so hard is when we hear those things is I don't think that there's ever going to be a reason that, like a good reason that our babies died, and that there's no better place than them being in our arms. But I think that just those people who were willing to sit with me, like I said, not wanting to fix anything, but just saying, I'm so sorry. Like, there really aren't any words, and I'm here to cry with you and grieve with you, and also to honor Magnolia with you. So anyone that would ask me questions about her, and that's what I really liked about when I went back to teaching first grade, was that kids are not afraid to say anything. They're not afraid to like ask those hard questions, but they're also not afraid to bring up Magnolia. And I think sometimes the most hurtful scenario was when, grown-ups would just ignore you or pretend that they were unaware. So just, yeah, sitting in grief.
Pollyann, just to echo some of the pieces that you had shared, people asking about my babies and checking in on me really means a lot to me. And so I have family members who will call once in a while and just say, hey, I'm thinking of you and I'm thinking of all of your children living and your children in heaven. And just the opportunity to celebrate that they were here, but then also grieve and them grieve alongside me means the world to me. Um, One of the things that I find really helpful and that we do as a family is that all of like we talk about um, the babies in heaven all the time, and we have a special book dedicated to James, and so we're able to read that. I'm able to read that with my 14-month-old, and so it makes me feel really connected. And it's important for me that my living children don't forget about our babies in heaven as well. And I think that we've kind of created a culture in our family where it's okay to talk about it and it's not weird to talk about it. And there's no um, topics that are off the table. Um, and so that makes me feel really connected to all of my children and really loved. Yeah, and then just to like echo the things that like aren't helpful is, yeah, people try to say the right things, and I think a lot of the times it's because people feel uncomfortable, and so they just kind of want to shut down the grief or shut down the tears. And so yeah, anything that is like minimizing of the experience. One of the best things actually that my friend did was she wrote me a card and that had like a little care basket, and the card, all it said was, there are no words to say, but I'm here for you and I love you. And that was the best. And that's all that I needed. I couldn't even process anything else further than that. So simple, sitting with me, that's what really got me through.
Yeah, kind of what Jamie and Hallian have already said. We, like we got a lot of cards and notes afterwards, and I don't remember what they all said, but I remember every single person that sent me something. Like, we'll be in conversation and somebody will come up and I'm like, "Oh yeah, they sent us a really lovely card." And I just like I remember all of those things, and I still have them all too. Um we So like I think those were the most meaningful things to me. Like nothing actually material or like tangible, but like those were where I found like the most value and the most healing. On the other hand though, like we also had people say and do like really rude stupid things. There's always like the, oh, God has a plan, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, I had a plan too, but I guess that's fine. We had someone who is very close to us tell us that our marriage wasn't as legitimate as theirs because we did not have living children. So like we've also had people say really stupid, awful things to us, and I don't forget those either. But I do kind of want to add, to wrap this all up in a nice bow. Recently I was at an event for RTZ. I was doing a table there, and this woman came up and she was talking to me, and she was like an older woman, very clearly like close to her faith. And she was reading one of the RTZ cards about like what's helpful and what's hurtful after a loss. And she was kind of asking me like, do people really say these things? And I was like, yeah, they do. You know, like I can't tell you how many times somebody told me that my baby dying was in God's plan. And she just said, well, God doesn't do that. And I was like, wow, that that's like the first time that I think somebody has ever like validated that to me. And so that was really nice. And so if somebody ever says that to you, you can tell them that. And you can also punch them if you need to.
Thank you all. Yeah, I think we've all experienced a lot of that. I see a lot of like yeses in the chats of people going, yeah, I've heard that as well, and that wasn't helpful. So I would love to explore, a few of you kind of mentioned it, but this idea of like, okay, we're in our grief, and grief is acute at the beginning, but there is a time, like Holly Ann talked about, we have to go back to work maybe, or we start to parent other children, maybe the living children we already have, or we get pregnant and start parenting those children. And this idea of, I think so often we think like grief is linear, right? We're even taught like the 5 stages of grief as if you walk through them all and then you're done, right? And I think we can all firsthand say like, that is not that is not always how it plays out, right? So I'd love to explore this idea of, what did grieving and re-entry into the world and sort of kind of getting back up on your feet look like in the short term, and then what does it look like in the long term, being where you are now and today.
I'm happy to kick off that conversation. I remember going back to work and just being like so angry at everybody because like my world had stopped, my baby had died, and people are just like continuing like nothing happened. And it felt really unfair. And I wanted opportunities to share about how I was feeling, but like, in your 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, like when do you ever just get to like sit down with a coworker or your supervisor and really get into that? And people would ask like, how are you? And it's like, oh, I'm good. It's like if I really told you how I was, like I might be sent home and might be like someone might call the doctor or something, like because I'm like really not okay and I'm really unwell and my heart is so incredibly broken. So at the beginning it was just really like day to day and minute to minute, like how do I get through this next minute? And that's really how i I did things. And then I would start to feel a little bit better, and then like something would happen, something would remind me of my babies or remind me of my loss, or I would see a pregnant belly, and that would be really hard. So as you're saying, Erin, like it wasn't linear. Like it would be like, okay, I'm starting to like feel okay, and then boom, you're just kind of like hit in the face, hit in the chest, and you need to figure that out. And I sometimes didn't feel like I could talk to people because time had passed and it seemed like they had moved on. Even like to speak candidly, sometimes with my husband, like we weren't always on the same trajectory of our healing and in our grief. And so sometimes I felt really alone when I was still just like sitting in that, and I wanted to sit in it too. And then there would be times when, okay, we got to pick ourselves up and brush ourselves off. And I think I'm going a little bit off tangent, but or a little bit, yeah, on a tangent. But like I think that when I'm least expecting it, this grief will bubble, and I'm getting better at sitting with it, walking with it, sharing with people about how I'm feeling, and then also know that it's healthy and it's normal. And probably when I'm 100 years old, I'm going to feel that grief, and that is just a part of who I am and how I carry my babies. But I also am able to accept joy a little bit more than at the beginning too.
I can go. So my return to like work and life, I think was a little bit different because I had already been off work for so long. Um, so I don't know if everyone except for Jaime is from the US, but so here you only get 12 weeks off. Like your legal entitlement is only to 12 weeks of time off. And so we had actually already been piecing a schedule together for me to go back to work part-time because um we wanted me to have that time home with Hudson when he came home. Um so we were already working on, I was going to go back part-time. I was actually supposed to go back Monday and Hudson died like the Thursday before. So I never did go back part-time, but we were already faced with like, what is this going to look like, in the coming weeks? So Hudson died at the end of October and I took off a couple of extra weeks and I went back to work the week of Thanksgiving, knowing that it was a short week. Um, and so I was able to kind of like ease my way back in that way. I also was really lucky because the biggest parts of my support system, or a lot of them, were people that I worked with. So I had that support kind of already built in, which was really nice because at the time I worked for the government. And so, like, they're not always able to kind of like accommodate your needs in a way that I think like a private employer probably could. So going back to work for me was kind of a relief, honestly. Like, it was a way for me to kind of get some of my normal life back. That being said, though, I'm pretty sure that for 6 months after we lost Hudson, I blacked out. I have very few memories from that period of time, which actually is very normal. And I also want to play on something that Jaime said about her and her husband kind of not always grieving in the same way or in the same timeline. And that's definitely something that we experienced too. Um, there were a lot of, I think it's very different inherently to be like the birthing parent and experience a loss, and then to be the partner and to also experience the loss, but then to see your partner experience like this physical trauma. And then to continue experiencing it because like your body doesn't forget. Um, so that was something that we kind of had to work through a little bit, but I just kind of want to point out that it's also very normal to not grieve the same as your partner or to um like have to work through that. And the best advice that I have for that situation is get a really good therapist. Um that was my biggest outlet because like as a partner, like you want to be strong for your partner and you want to be there for them. And I did all of those things, but sometimes I didn't feel like I had anything left for me. Like who was my person? Um and so that's where like that therapy piece really comes in. So I think like in that time period, like having a really good therapist is the best thing that I did. So definitely do that.
Um, you both touched on some really great points, and uh, I think because I was a teacher, my story of returning to work is a little bit unique. Um, so first of all, my teaching partners both were pregnant at the same time that I was. One of my teaching partners had her baby a month after, and one of my teaching partners was 8 months pregnant when I went back. Um, And I think for me, the hardest part was anything that I either didn't have control over or I didn't expect. So anything that was unexpected. Um, so I remember coming in each day and it was like, okay, I know the secretary is going to ignore me. It's just what she does, right? But I can expect that. Um, I know that this child has a lot of difficult behaviors and might say some things that are really hurtful. Like, well, maybe you had too much candy and that's why your baby died. Again, these were things that I expected and went in and was able to get through. The things for me that were unexpected were like getting honked at, on the way to school, and you just want to scream. Like, do you think you can hurt me? Do you think honking is actually going to affect me? Like, my baby just died. And, if only you knew what was going on in each of these cars, I think you'd be a much nicer person. Um, and then also, being a teacher to young children, I think some of the things that were very difficult for me was um, I had a student and it was her birthday. And I knew that I had all the plans of how we were going to celebrate her. But when she walked in that morning, she had this beautiful yellow dress. And I just remember thinking, that's her birthday dress. And Magnolia will never get a birthday dress. Um, we're just seeing like freckles or, little distinct characteristics that the students had, and just wondering um, what Magnolia would have looked like. Um, so again, for me, it was all of those unexpected things. Um, but I just gave myself a lot of grace and permission to feel those feelings. And if that meant that I had to sit in the parking lot and cry or, my play-in period or my lunch period, um, then I was going to allow myself to do that.
Thank you all for sharing. I can relate to so much of it. For my first miscarriage, was working at a nonprofit when I was out of the classroom. Holly Ann, that's a whole other level and reminder every day. So as a former teacher, I just applaud your courage to go back and to experience that. I remember I really didn't. I took one day off, right? Because I hadn't told anybody I was pregnant. It was so early. I just didn't feel the permission to like give myself any more time. And we were in the middle of a huge project for a federally funded grant. And I just thought, I got to be there. And I just remember being so frustrated and angry over everything, anything and everything. And just, why doesn't anybody know? And it's like, well, I haven't told anybody, but still, like, why can't they just tell? And why aren't they being more helpful? And, why didn't they do their job the way they should? And just this like frustration and anger over everything. And it took a while to work out. And, for my second miscarriage, I was parenting a 2-year-old, and there was like almost 3-year-old. There was just like not the same rooms for grief. It's like we got to pick up and go. Like, I got a toddler here who does not understand, why my mom is not available. And so I just remember really juggling those two different experiences, and one feeling like, okay, I'm kind of forced. It was sort of resentful of my toddler, of like, I need space here to grieve, but I'm so grateful I have you and you're my rainbow baby, and I shouldn't be feeling that way. And just all of these mixed emotions over that. And I just relate so much to this idea of what our husbands are going through and how it's so different, and I remember my husband wanting to not fix me, but support me and take care of me and help me, because like I said, with our first one, he didn't even know I was pregnant. Right. And so now it was like, oh my gosh, I've got to help her and I've got to fix her. And he hadn't even attached to the idea of being a dad yet. And he tried to take me out. And I just remember, stop trying to take me on date nights. Like, the world has stopped for me. Like, I need it to stop. Stop trying to like make it normal. Just let me have it stop. But not really, I don't think, knowing that I could give myself permission to let it stop for a while. And that was hard. And it definitely came up in my other my subsequent pregnancies and my parenting. And in our relationship, it's been something we've had to kind of work out. And so I just really relate to everything you all have said. And, I'd love to talk a little bit about like parenting after loss and how that looks for all of us. And especially as moms, I think we have a unique role to fill as mothers. And so what has it been like? I know my pregnancies came pretty quickly after each loss. And I know that they played a role in postpartum depression and anxiety, and even the feeling depression and anxiety during my pregnancies and trying to wrestle with all of that. And then, my daughter was a very high needs baby. Is still a very high needs kid. She's been diagnosed autistic. And I just remember feeling guilt every time I was frustrated with her. But you're my rainbow baby. Both of them are my rainbow babies. Like, should all be a rainbow, right? But there's still that underlying grief and things that you're dealing with. So if we could just spend a few minutes talking about what it's been like to be a mom, who's experienced loss. I'd love to hear some of your stories around that.
Erin, I want to build on something that you said. So you said that you always felt like a lot of guilt for being frustrated with your kids because they're your rainbow, right? And I have felt that way too, many, many times. You know, it's like, oh, the baby's up all night and my husband's been gone for 3 days and I just want to go to sleep. And then I'm like, well, but this is everything that I've ever wanted, right? And it is. But I think sometimes we like gaslight ourselves into thinking that it can't be hard and also you can't be grateful for it. Like it has to be one or the other. And that's not true. Like we have plenty of hard days. But also I do think that I parent our living children differently because we've had a loss. And I don't really know like how to describe that. Like I don't think I love my kids more than somebody who hasn't had a loss, but I do think I love them differently. And I don't have a lot of words for that. Like I don't really know how to explain what that's like, but I do think that's true. And also with that, like we talk about Hudson all the time, multiple times a day, I'm sure. Our 2.5-year-old, he doesn't really talk yet, but he knows who Hudson is. He can point him out in pictures and, like he knows that he does have a brother. Bennett's still a little bit too small, but like he will also grow up knowing that. And that just feels right for us. So that is a big part of kind of like parenting after loss. I am a little bit like nervous though, because I do know that like kids who have a sibling born like children who have lost a sibling who died before they were born often do like grieve that as they get older. And we're not there yet, but that's one of those things that keeps me up at night. I really worry a lot about that. So that is kind of what like parenting after loss has been like for us.
I remember pregnancy after loss was feeling like holding your breath for 9 months. And parenting after loss is feeling like you're going to lose them at any time, any day. So again, I think there's a lot of that postpartum anxiety in general. and just, yeah, I mean, grieving. And I remember after we had lost Magnolia, a friend commented on how clean my car was. And she said, mine's just, oh, it's always full. And I said, oh, yeah, I have Cheerios. And obviously at the time, it was so hard for me. You know, it's like I wanted to scream at her, like, oh, you're so lucky that your car is so messy. After being a parent to a toddler, like my car has not been clean ever, you know, in the past 3.5 years. Um, but like I just really like what Erin and Jakki, you both said about acknowledging that parenting is hard, even after, you know, even if it's something that you have waited for and that you have wanted and you've prayed for, and it's finally here, but it's still okay to acknowledge that it's hard. Um, and it's okay to acknowledge that, yes, I like that. I love that, Jakki, you said that you love them differently. And I think it's just because you have this outlook on life. I mean, you just, when you grieve differently than others, I think you live differently than others, and I think you parent differently than others. And so for Marigold, I was so nervous because since Magnolia was born before her, I wasn't sure what that would look like. I didn't know if she would acknowledge her. Um, and it has been so beautiful and so heartbreaking um, to see her really fully embrace being this little sister, um, and having those difficult conversations of, well, I want to go see her. And, you know, I wish that she were here, and like her weighted bear, um, her being very like protective over that, and very, you know, sweet. But I also find myself, I have to step back sometimes and not, I think like I know now that it will happen naturally. Because I do think that sometimes I'm like, oh, you know, I wrote a children's book. Should we read that one tonight? And she's like, no. Just acknowledging that, like, it's okay if it's not this picture perfect, you know, where that she's going to speak of Magnolia every day, or that, because in reality, if Magnolia were here, like they probably would be arguing, and they, you know, they would have their difficult moments and their great moments. And that is parenting after loss. That is parenting between the space of my children, is that I'm parenting them both at the same time, and it looks so different. Um, but it can still be a really beautiful thing too.
So many of what all three of you shared like really resonates with me. I think that for us, when we lost James, it was really difficult to share that with my stepdaughters. And I think that I really struggled at the time with like, how much do we share? What do we share? How do we share that? I think like for myself, ending a wanted pregnancy came with a lot of guilt and shame. And I worried a lot about judgment from others. Um, Admittedly, I might have been a judgmental person before having gone through something like this. Like my heart has shifted and changed so much in that. So I think parenting my teenage daughters in that was really difficult, and I was as raw and as honest through that as I possibly could be. And I think they're stronger for that too. And I'm glad that we navigated through it in that way. Parenting Bo now, who is 14 months, is like, I totally agree with what everybody has said about like it's okay to be super happy and also really annoyed with your child at the same time. Like that's so normal and expected. But there are times when I still feel like a little bit guilty, like, oh, I shouldn't feel frustrated about this, or like this is what I've always wanted, but I do just try to balance that. Another thing that I try to not do, and Pollyann, maybe you were like circling around this a bit, is like Bo's his own person. And I don't want Bo's identity to be like the brother that came after James. And so we talk about James all the time. That's like really important in our family. And also sometimes I do have to check myself to like make sure I'm not like putting any of that on Bo. Cause that like Bo's of course the little brother, but it's not his responsibility to like be the rainbow baby and like whatever that means for him. So I'm still like working through that with friends that have gone through loss and with my therapist as well, but how I can like balance that and still support Bo to be exactly as he needs to be with no expectations of anything on that.
Thank you all. That I just resonated with so much of what you shared. And Holly Ann, when you said like, this is the time, right? Like this is the time. I remember every prenatal appointment and like every sickness or injury, it's been like, oh, this is it. This is when it happens. This is it, you know? And you putting words to that, I was, yes, I know that feeling. I cannot believe how fast our hour has gone. We are at the last few minutes. So before we wrap it up, I want to just remind everybody that the RTC Hope website is full of resources. If you've heard of anything in here and you want resources for speaking with somebody you know who's experienced a loss, we have those. A family member you might be supporting or walking through. If you're a provider, please check out our education and resources for providers. If something has come up out of here and stories and you want to join a support group, we have a bunch of those for all different types of losses, including ones for partners. So please check those out. And then I want to do just a quick round robin of any final thoughts, any final like hopes for the future for yourself or for the world of pregnancy and infant loss, or any words of wisdom you want to share, and we'll wrap up our time together.
I just want to thank everybody who came today. I think that we're growing as a society to be a place where we can talk about our losses and people don't clutch their pearls. So I guess my hope is that we just continue the conversation and that everybody has the confidence, I guess, to share their stories when and how it makes sense. So yeah, thank you for having me today.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Jaime. I know that you haven't really shared too much about James in the past. And so I know that you're really nervous, and I'm really proud of you.
And I just want to also say thank you to everybody who was in the comments. I was reading all the messages and just getting tears in my eyes because it just, this felt like such a beautiful community. I mean, that's what this is a community conversation, but it just felt like such a safe and beautiful space. And that we're here to grieve, but we're also here to honor our babies and to live a joyful life because of them. And so I really appreciated that. So thank you, Jaime, for sharing. Thank you, Jakki, for sharing. And thank you, Erin, for sharing and for hosting and putting this all together.
Well, I couldn't do it without you all sharing your stories, and everyone who was willing to hear our stories and to engage in them and to share your own in the chats and comments. It's truly my wish and my heart that this becomes normal for us, and that it doesn't take one of us sharing to find out how many others have. I remember in my own circles, I shared my story and I had people I had known all my life say, oh, me too. And I just thought, well, that would have been nice to know. Not that you owe me your story, but if we all pave the path, you know, for each other, and we all shine a light behind us, then hopefully we're not all walking through these experiences in the dark on our own. So that's truly my hope. And I just, Jakki, Jaime, and Holly Ann, my heart is so full, and I'm so grateful. And thank you to all who have attended. Please save the date for June. What do we say? June 27th at 10. We will be having a very similar conversation with fathers who have walked through loss in honor of our partners and other fathers who have experienced this. So we hope you'll come back, watch your email boxes for more information on that. And please feel free to contact us with any questions or needs you might have. Thank you all again.